Is it just me or does this shirt not look as wrinkly on camera as it does in person? It's probably just the viewfinder. It'll probably look really bad when I go to edit. Oh well. Oh, hi, my name is Sarah Freshly. Welcome back to Freshly Read Books. So I haven't prepped for this video, so it's a bit off the cuff. We're just gonna go through, review the books that I've read in the last 2 months. You know most of them if you've been watching my channel because it's Booker season. But I still wanna talk about them, talk about some of the Booker books a little bit more quickly than I do in the review videos, and then talk about some of the other books that I've read that I haven't really mentioned at all. I'm literally using my own Instagram's like highlight to remember what books that I've read in the past 2 months because they're starting to blend together. It's 4 months in and I can't figure out what I've read in the first 2 months versus the second 2 months. But good opportunity to plug. I post every book that I have read on my Instagram story and then I save it in a highlight with a quote that I liked from the book. So check that out if you haven't already. All right, so I am ready to talk about the books that I have read in March/April. So the first one that I read entirely in March was Filthy Animals by Brandon Taylor. This is a collection of short stories by Brandon Taylor, who also wrote Real Life, which was shortlisted for the 2020 Booker Prize. I almost said 2021, it's not. This was also the book that I read for the March TBR Tackle. So if you want to see more of my thoughts and for me to go more in depth, then definitely check that out. But as a brief synopsis, I enjoyed this collection of short stories. I did not enjoy it nearly as much as I loved Real Life by Brandon Taylor, but I still had a lot of fun reading them. The stories that jumped out at me more and that I enjoyed more was Mass and Anne of Cleves. I thought were fantastic. So overall, I had fun reading it. It was an enjoyable experience. It's not like one of my favorite books, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. Next, I read Forever Interrupted by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is one of the books that I haven't talked about at all. Forever Interrupted is about a woman who gets married pretty quickly after meeting a guy, I think it's like 6 months or something that they were together, but a couple of days after their engagement, he gets, I think, hit by a car and he passes away. So you get like 2 timelines. That happens right away in the book. That's not a spoiler. So you get kind of 2 timelines, which is one is from the beginning of their relationship up until that happens, and then the other is starting with him dying and then like her process grieving and getting through this, and like it turns out that his family doesn't really know about her and like all that kind of stuff. So like navigating those situations is what the other timeline is. Overall, I think that this was all right. It was kind of interesting, but for the most part, I really didn't like any of the part that was the relationship, like starting with the beginning of the relationship till when he dies. But the other one I did kind of like. I am a sucker for stories that are about people kind of like getting their lives together or getting like past something that's really traumatic and like having those, you know, good days and bad days, that type of thing. I do typically like those types of stories, but I think that this one was kind of surface level, I guess, and it didn't really explore into that as much as it could have. Totally understandable. It's more of like a romance, I guess. It's kind of weird to call it a romance when like the guy dies in like the first chapter. So yeah, not my favorite by her, but not my least favorite. Ooh, you know what? I'd have to think more on that. But actually, the whole reason that I'm reading her books is to do a full analysis, like deep dive into her writing in a video. So this is just working my way towards that goal. So if you want to know how I would rank all of those books, then definitely subscribe because I will be doing that eventually. Okay, and then the Booker long list was announced. So when that happened, I read the Book of Mother. It took me until like last week, the week before, to actually talk about it in a review because I don't really have a lot to say on this one. It's basically about a mother and her 2 children, and they are like kind of learning more about the mother's past. And I think it starts with the mom being in a hospital after having like this breakdown and a divorce. But this isn't like the first time that this has happened. And yeah, like premise-wise interesting, but I don't know. There was something just like missing there for me. I have seen a lot, both on like in the comments of my video on it and also on like Goodreads reviews and things like that, that a lot of this was lost in translation, that the experience reading this was a lot better in French. So maybe I would have enjoyed it more if I were able to read it in its original language. However, I don't know French like at all, so And then I read Love in the Big City by Sang-Young Park and translated by Anton. It follows Young, who is kind of like navigating his way through life, I guess, in Seoul, South Korea. And it's really broken out into the different relationships of his life. So I think it's 4 parts, and like each one kind of focuses on a relationship. So the first one starts with a big friendship that was an influence in his life, and then it kind of continues on. You get to see like boyfriends that he has, his mother. So I did enjoy this book, but it was just kind of like missing a bit for me, and I liked the tone of it. I think like that was my favorite part. The tone, like the sarcastic nature of the narrator. It got like a little bit meta at times, which I always love in a book. But it did this thing where at like the beginning of each part, you would kind of get a glimpse at what would be the end of it. And then you go back through like in the right order. And so you kind of have a vague idea of how things are gonna turn out, and it's not enough to make you like motivated to find out like, oh, why do things end up that way? It more just feels like, oh, you just know how things are gonna end up, and like, what's even the point? And I found that I ended up losing a lot of my interest in the book because of that. The next book I read was Elena Knows, which I have not actually filmed a video about yet, but I will be soon. This book is about a mother, Elena, and her daughter has just passed away, and the police are saying it was a suicide. Elena thinks that it is, or Elena knows that it was not suicide. She thinks that she was murdered. And so you get to see like a day in Elena's life with some flashbacks to what things were like prior. I thought it was super interesting the way that you kind of know about their relationship from it already being ended, because I can't remember her daughter's name, but her daughter's passed away. But then you get these glimpses like back, and you see what their relationship was actually like and how strained it was. And I think it was kind of funny to like play off of that. You know, you just kind of assumed that they had this great relationship, and really they did have these struggles that were involved. This book was very sad for me. Like I had a hard time reading it just emotionally, which I didn't fully expect. I think it's a lot to do with Elena's illness that she's dealing with. She has Parkinson's, and being in her head and reading her perspective and just like being in her body basically as you're reading is a tough experience. And yeah, it was hard. But overall, I think the book had a lot of great things to say, and this is one of the ones I was really looking forward to, and I think I was right to do so. I'll leave it at that until my review video on it. Okay, and then I read, I think these are out of order, but that's cool. Then I read More Than I Love My Life by David Grossman. This one was just kind of all right for me. I did enjoy the end of it. It's about like 3 generations of women. So Vera's the grandmother, then Nina, her daughter, and then Nina's daughter, Gilly. Gilly is making a documentary along with her father, Raphael. And the documentary is focused on like Vera / Nina / who knows? It kind of shifts as the story progresses. I think that it's an interesting concept. However, I don't think the execution was great. Then we got After the Sun by Jonas Eika, which is a short story collection, I guess. Again, there's like 5 stories, but 2 of them are like halves of the same story. This one, I, for the most part, was kind of like meh about. I really didn't like some stories, like Rachel Nevada, really didn't like that one, but I did really like the first one, which I think was called like Alvin or something. Yeah, Alvin. Next was Happy Stories Mostly by Norman Erikson Pasaribu and translated by Tiffany Tsao. This one was another short story collection, and this one I really liked, actually. I had a lot of fun with this one. I thought it was fantastic. There were a lot of the stories that I was really into. I loved the varying ways that the stories were told, that it would take these different perspectives. I felt like there was never a moment where I was like bored by reading short stories, or that I felt like I had to take a break in order to appreciate them again, which sometimes I do get in short story collections, despite the fact that I do love them. But a lot of times I can't just go through and read them just because it starts to kind of feel monotonous, or like once you get the themes, then there's not a lot of newness being presented, but this, because the way the stories were told were different as it went through, it had a really great reading experience. So I really liked Happy Stories mostly. Then another one I haven't talked about yet, I read Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. This is the book that Blade Runner is based off of, both Blade Runner movies, and I had a lot of fun reading this one. I ended up doing a read along with Sandy, Gemma, and Fraser. All of their channels will be here and in the description, so I highly recommend checking them out. We had so much fun reading this book, discussing. We read like 2 chapters a day and then like discussed it, so we spent a long time in just this little book, but there was so much to talk about, especially like towards the beginning when we're just kind of trying to figure out what the world was like and everything. Basically, there's this bounty hunter who is on Earth trying to find these specific androids that have escaped from Mars, I think it is, but it's tough to kind of tell like who's an android, who's not. There's a test that he can have them take. It's this whole thing. It's very interesting. I didn't love it as much as I thought I was going to based off of how much I loved the beginning of it. Like the first 50%, I was super invested in it, and even to like the first like 75%, although it started like losing steam around then. For me personally, I was really I was loving the conversations that it was bringing up, and the sense of like paranoia it gave you, like who's an android, who isn't, and like you just second guess like everybody all the time. And I thought that was a lot of fun, but it did kind of lose that, and the ending, yeah, didn't love the ending. Then I read Fight Club, which was my TBR tackled book for April. So this video is out by now. You can see more of my thoughts about this book, although I don't go into it super in detail just because I feel like this is a story that a lot of people know, either through the book or the movie. But basically it's about a guy that's trying to like escape his everyday worries, or like there's a lot of like the world doesn't care about you, and like so you shouldn't care about other things, and like I don't want to die without having any scars. So he like makes his friend, and then they start a fight club, but don't talk about it. Don't want to talk about Fight Club. It's the first rule. But anyways, I'd already seen the movie, so I knew the story, but this was nice to kind of like read the book, understand where it came from. And also this was my first Chuck Palahniuk, so that was kind of nice. Then for my book club, I read The Once and Future Witches by Alix E. Harrow, I'm not sure. This story is about these 3 sisters that, and like it's in this world where witchcraft is kind of, like it did exist, but it's kind of been drifting away, but not fully, and it's like passed on in like these fairy tales from like grandmothers to grandchildren, that kind of thing. And so there's 3 women that are at the center of this. You switch between their perspectives and them kind of trying to bring witchcraft back into this world, and also fighting for like rights of women. I don't want to talk too much into it because I feel like the interesting part is like the second half of the story. I really struggled through part 1 of the book, and then once I made it to part 2, I was like in it, and then part 3, man, I was super in it by then. So this was kind of a slow burn for me, but I had fun reading it. It's not something that I would typically have picked up if it wasn't picked for my book club, so I was glad that I got to read this one. And then lastly, I reread Beartown by Fredrik Backman. So I won't talk about it too much. I have a video on my channel that is talking about every book that Fredrik Backman has written, and then a follow-up to that one when he published Anxious People. Basically, I think I even said in that one that I was hoping to reread Beartown and Us Against You, which are the first 2 books in the Beartown series, the third of which, and I believe final one, is coming out this year in October, called The Winners. So I now have a review e-copy of The Winners, and so now I need to like kick myself into gear and reread, or actually I'm listening to this time, the first 2 books. So I listened to Beartown, which the audiobook is fantastic, by the way. I read it my first time through, so this is my first experience of the audiobook, and the narrator is amazing. She does a wonderful job. I finished it so quickly. I couldn't believe how quickly I got through it, considering like I already knew the story. Basically, it's about a small town that has a hockey team, and like all of their like hopes and dreams are just like in this hockey team, even though it's just basically children that are in it, like teenagers. There's a lot of commentary about the specific words that we use and jokes that are said, and there's a lot around that that's really an interesting conversation to have, and one that I don't think I like really thought about as much my first read through. And then of course like the actual heart of the story is it's a tough one to read, but I had fun rereading it. I mean, obviously the tough parts were still tough, but just being in like the town that Backman created in that novel, it's just, there's something like oddly comforting about it in the beginning, and then it like turns sinister. It's just, he does a really good job. I forgot how much I liked Beartown until I just like re-listened to it. But yeah, I feel like I'm gonna have to change my rankings for those videos when I film the updated version sometime soon. But yeah, I think that that's everything for this video. I wanted this to be super quick, and I feel like it's still gonna be long, but these things happen. So I hope that you did enjoy this video. Hopefully next 2 months I'll have more books to talk about, but if not, whatever. We're putting no pressure on ourselves this year. That's the goal now. But I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please do consider subscribing, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.